Okay, so my name is Ashley Gjøvik. I'm really excited to be here. A huge fan of Jackie and this project and everything you all are doing. I am really excited to talk to you about restoration and resilience as a whistleblower. And I'm going to start with just a quick little introduction of me because I'm kind of an unusual whistleblower in the sense that I was kind of one of those rare ones that I was pretty high up at a big company. I had a type of position where I generally expected people to listen to me and I had influence. And when I made disclosures that I thought were pretty fundamental, environmental, health and safety, and met the retaliation that just anyone meets, you realize it doesn't matter what your job title is or where you work. Just if a company is going to retaliate, an agency is going to retaliate, they just do. And then some of us just kind of respond with a more holistic response than typical whistleblower workflows. And I was one of those. So I was like, aggrieved that they wouldn't listen to someone who's supposed to be one of their advisors and consultants. And so one of the things I want to talk to you about today though is the different paths that whistleblowers can take, because I think oftentimes the way that it's presented is pretty narrow, that there's maybe one or two paths, and that's kind of the only option. And I was in a position where I took a lot of different approaches because I was also dealing with a very big company that I knew was going to be asymmetrical. But in doing that, I learned a lot about different ways to achieve something that you might want to as a whistleblower. And so I'm going to talk through that process. I'm also going to share with you, since we're talking about adversity, some of the challenges that I faced in my journey, trying to navigate some of the more typical pathways. So, I mean, as we've all talked, everyone's talking about today, we all know whistleblowers face an incredible amount of adversity. Retaliation, no matter where you're blowing the whistle, you're going to face some sort of institutional control or coercion. Otherwise, you're not really whistleblowing. You're just making a complaint and they're taking it seriously and investigating. So, generally, when that doesn't happen, it's occurring in a place where they're going to have a lot of control and coercion and try to quiet things down and control the full process. I think everyone also, if you either are working for the government or you're trying to make a report to the government, you're going to face some inaction, them not wanting to actually look into stuff or taking a long time. And of course, as the retaliation's happening and there's a spotlight on you, people pull back, you lose support. You also have very little access to information. The employer, the government's going to have way more information about just about everything about your disclosures, the retaliation, your complaints than you do. And it can take multiple years. It could take forever to get any progress at all. And even when you do, generally, you're not even made whole. So even if you're suing for retaliation and you want to get damages for what was lost, you're generally not getting that full amount. And then the lawyer takes like a third. So, even if you're fighting that whole thing, you never really get made whole. So sometimes you're asking, what was the point of it? And so that's what I want to talk about. What is the point of all of this? Because I think there's other ways and multiple ways to try to get the justice that a lot of whistleblowers want. And to that point also, that final point was something I thought about a lot, which is investigations into retaliation are very common. You file a complaint about the retaliation for being a whistleblower, but very rarely is there any kind of formal investigation into the original disclosures. And I think that's something that is very, very harmful to whistleblowers. I would say spiritually. For me, it was spiritually. Of this whole thing was about XYZ. Cracks in the slab at the Superfund site with the toxic waste vapors. That's what I want to talk about. Why are we talking about retaliation for years? So I think a lot of that, that's just kind of front loaded to be a challenge. And then for me personally, I started filing complaints with government agencies. And that was before I realized that there's a 99% chance the government agencies won't find in your favor. That's literally their public metric, that's on their websites of they're not going to do anything and it's going to take forever. And so after that was where I started, I got pretty frustrated, kind of realizing I was stuck in that queue and I probably would have done it differently had I known that was their published procedures and outcomes. And then also, as people have talked about already today, struggling to get agencies to actually investigate, to take any action. I also got a lot of them just urging me to withdraw my claims because it was easier for them. And I'm like, no. But then there's also often no appeals with the employment and labor groups. So OSHA, you can't appeal OSHA dismissals. It goes nowhere. NLRB, you can't appeal NLRB dismissals either. It doesn't go to a court. And I have I could go for an hour about that. But that's something I think people don't actually anticipate. That also employers that have the information will hold it forever. That was something that I had to deal with. It took me 4 years to get even basic evidence from them. And then financial loss, physical harm. I wish I could be there with you. I'm in bankruptcy. Apple drug my stuff out for 4 years. So I'm going through that. But I kind of knew signing up for it that it would probably be this kind of journey. But it shouldn't be that way for anyone. Even though we know it's this way, that doesn't like make it right. It's even more reason that we need to reform this and protect whistleblowers. And then I also struggled a lot with getting attorneys who would be willing to actually justify the expense of litigating against a party like Apple. When you have a company or an agency that has a ton of power, a ton of money, and they can just drag stuff out for years, attorneys literally can't justify the expense of doing that for years. So I fortunately was getting a law degree, and I've been doing my litigation pro se, but most people aren't in that position. So what I want to encourage folks to think about are the different multiple paths. So you have something you see, a wrongdoing, and you know it's hurting people, it could hurt people, it needs addressed. You try making the complaint. They're not listening. Maybe they're already covering it up. Maybe you go through a couple rounds of escalation. You might not realize the term whistleblower yet, but you're in the whistleblower zone. And you're wondering, like, what comes next? And I think the two most common paths that we hear about are the agency adjudication and then civil litigation. But there's other paths, and I'm going to just propose two more. There's a lot more, but two that I ended up preferring, which is one is like citizen complaints and advocacy. So for the environmental issues, filing complaints and like working directly with the EPA, environmental agencies to actually address the underlying environmental issues, to use public records requests to get records, and then activism. You can also do lobbying, talking to press, and those things can still get good outcomes for whistleblower disclosures without having to go through the adjudication or litigation process, but also can help. They help me a lot doing it all together, holistically, to put pressure. And so, like, I want to share just going through litigation. I've been a couple of years now in civil litigation against Apple in a federal court, and I'm doing it pro se. Discovery is very interesting. For those of you that don't know, you get to ask the other side a lot of questions. They won't answer usually. You have to press, but you can finally get documents. You can finally get some answers. And for this specific section, like, I want to talk about how that can be healing. For me, it was very healing. Even if, you know, the litigation's going forever and I'm in bankruptcy and they're trying to ruin my life, I finally get the document that shows, you know, the thing I knew it was happening. I find out that the picture I'm showing right now, I was formally under investigation in July for talking to New York Times about workplace safety. So, you know, getting that stuff can be, I think, healing for whistleblowers who oftentimes have to live with a lot of ambiguity and unknowns forever. And so if you can at least get something to hold on to me, that in itself was helpful. And then just to talk about, like, you know, some of the stuff that's come out of it for me, getting privilege logs that show that they're already talking about firing me before I supposedly did whatever misconduct they said I did. I was like, I knew it, you know, whistleblowers, we know it, but when you can get that in your hand, you know, records of HR reporting my whistleblowing that they say was like, you know, oh, that was protected, we never retaliate, but calling it leaking and saying I was under investigation. So again, like, outside just litigation and remedies and trying to get money owed to you, sometimes seeing that stuff, I think, can be extraordinarily healing for whistleblowers. It's very validating. It counters the gaslighting. And then for the agency adjudications, probably my biggest win was getting NLRB to have a decision of merit on my NLRB charges about Apple's policies, work policies, their NDAs, their misconduct policy, their talking to press policies, their surveillance policies. And so Apple they settled, and they had to post this 3 pages. They had to post it online, I think in their offices too. It was a national settlement. And so something like this also, of like, even though sometimes agencies will like undo decisions of merit, I'm dealing with that right now with NLRB, with the change of administration, and they're like, we might be changing our mind, you know. So a lot of that can be in flux, but once you get something like this, you can hold on. Like, this is still printed and on my fridge. It's been there for months. You know, this is really exciting and something tangible. It makes me feel very accomplished in the sense of I actually made a dent as someone trying to blow the whistle on, this is kind of a meta thing of the secrecy and the concealment and not letting people speak up generally. So that kind of thing, I think, can also be really helpful. But then, as I was mentioning, the citizen advocacy of, you could also just go outside the normal retaliation type litigation adjudications, or do it alongside them. and escalate issues to the agencies about the underlying problems, what started it all. And with that, I was actually able to make way more progress and much quicker than the retaliation stuff, which I think is actually by design. They just want to drag it out forever, so you give up. So actually working with the agencies to get it documented, what those issues were, get them to, order fixes, getting the reports that said something was wrong and it did need fixed, that also validates the whistleblower's underlying disclosures. So that was another way I found to counter that gaslighting of, no, I was right, and the government said you did have to fix it. So we'll still sort out all the retaliation stuff, but it feels very good to get them to fix the actual issues. And so just a couple of pictures of the public records, FOIA request violations. This is another thing I think as whistleblowers, if you can get something like this in your hand, it is very validating, counters the gaslighting, makes you feel like it was worth it. Like when I see that stuff, I was like, it was worth it. That was something I was upset about. I got action. It was documented. This feels now like there's a point in what I'm doing, because oftentimes the adjudication and litigation leaves you feeling like, what is the point of this? So I think this can help support that, but also on its own can be another thing that whistleblowers can do. And then for the advocacy also, either separately or in combination, getting articles in the press about the achievements is also, I think, very helpful to have a milestone of progress, because whistleblowers can't fight forever. At some point you have to say okay, this is good enough on that thing that I wanted to blow the whistle on, that I wanted to make sure was remedied. And I think articles sometimes can be a good milestone for that. And it helps bolsters the cases overall. So what I tell people when they're asking me about, advice for whistleblowing, advice for whistleblowers, what I frequently say will just be, talk through this kind of thing and ask, what does justice look like to you? Because it doesn't have to look like what the attorneys say or what the OIG says or what the senator says. It could look like that. It could look like a mix of multiple things. But I think for each person, if you're going to go on the whistleblower journey, which is deciding this is worth fighting for, I'm going to fight for it, what is the outcome you actually want? And oftentimes when people are asked that, they think it's how much money? But no, it's do you want the original thing fixed? Do you want more people to know about the original systemic issues? Do you want people organizing for some kind of systemic change? Do you want everyone wants made whole? If you have money taken from you, you want it back. But there's a lot of other things too. And so I definitely encourage people to think about that, because I think one of the things that's kept me going personally through this tumultuous last 4 years has definitely been that I defined early on of what does justice look like for me? What do I want to achieve? And then I was willing to pivot along the way and check in. When I was oh, the agencies don't do anything. They're just going to let everything die in their queues for years. So then pivoting and saying, okay, now what else can I do to keep pushing towards that end goal I had? And I encourage other people to think about that and keep an open mind about this, and just go back to that original need of what was so important that you saw, that you knew that it was probably going to blow up when you kept pushing, but you decided it was worth it anyways. How do you want that process to end?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to turn this over to Noelle.
Thank you very much. Thought we'd have some time for questions.
We'll do that,
at the end.
I want everybody to have a chance to talk before we have to leave.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Noelle Webb, and as you already know, I am a pharmaceutical industry whistleblower. And I started my journey in 2013, and I just thought that it would just never end. But now listening to other people's stories, I realized that mine is, just about on par with everyone else's. So mine started in 2013, and it was a qui tam false claims whistleblower suit, actually 3 of them. And the final one settled in May of this year. So this is all very fresh and new to me, and having my picture out there with my name, and it's just a little bit uncomfortable to speak about this, because for so long I had to remain silent because all of this was done under seal. So this has been my saving grace. So this is Tully. who is trying to leave us right now. But Tully is a 7-year-old golden retriever, and I've had her for 6 years. I trained her as a service dog for myself, actually, and you'll hear the story here. Again, like I said, this is the first time I've really ever spoken in public about this, so if it feels a little stilted, it probably is, but I'll get over that as we get into it a little bit more. So let me just set the stage for how I came to whistleblowing and how I came to this beautiful girl beside me. I won't go into a lot of the details on the whistleblowing because if you want to read about it, you can Google my name. But let's just say that everyone here has been through that hell, so I don't really have to go into great detail on that. But as far as whatever prompted me, I think the prompt came very, very early in my life. As I recognized, for some reason as a child, I recognized courageous people. And I just thought, wow, how are they so brave? How can they put all of this on the line? Even as a child, I recognized that. And then moving into my adulthood, I really had to look no further for courage than my own family members who are veterans. So my father was a Korean War veteran, and he was tortured. And my father-in-law was in the Second World War and served aboard the USS Manila Bay during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, which was the largest naval battle ever. So these two men were very inspiring to me and lived very courageous, admirable, productive lives, raising families. And that always that stayed with me in my heart and in my mind. And I don't think I didn't realize how much it would come to my being that I really needed those examples in my life. So I began working in the pharmaceutical industry in 1987. And during my long tenure there, I worked for large companies, Hoffman La Roche, Novartis, AstraZeneca. I'm sure you've all heard of those. But then I also worked for smaller niche companies that were primarily pain medication companies. So this is where I had a front row seat to the moral devaluation of the pharmaceutical industry. Was with these small companies in the early 2000s with pain medication. So I always thought that I was part of the solution, that I was bringing life-saving medications to people, and I realized that was naive, but that was who I was at that point. And then once I started seeing clearly illegal marketing practices, and I was pressured to conform to them, I thought, oh, I can't do this anymore. And I had no one around me who would speak up with me. I would talk to my colleagues and I'd say, we know this is not right, let's say something. And it was as if I had said, I'm going to steal your firstborn child. Literally, they would stop talking to me and turn their backs on me. And so I kind of knew that I was in this all alone, but it came to a point after 25 years that I really couldn't take it any longer. So motivated, not by money, just like Ashley, I was not motivated by money, but I was motivated by my own personal integrity and sense of responsibility that I had. And I knew that once I exposed what I was going to expose, that there would be consequences. But knowing there are going to be consequences and living with the consequences are two vastly different things. Once you're in the middle of it and you're living with these consequences, it's pretty frightening at times because you don't know what the outcome is going to be. But if you have this really strong moral courage, hopefully that can help you get through, which is what happened to me. So once I reported the wrongdoing, the retaliation started immediately. I was isolated from my peers. There was gaslighting. I went from an award-winning employee to suddenly I need remedial sales training within a matter of weeks. There was blacklisting. I lost my reputation. I lost my job. I lost my career. I didn't have health care for 10 years. I basically lost my identity. And what am I going to do now really set in deeply. So I had entered a legal battle that was going to last, which I didn't realize, more than a decade. But as we all know, whistleblowing doesn't happen in a vacuum, and life carries on. And there were things in my personal life that added on to the trauma that I was experiencing through the retaliation of whistleblowing. So several years into my revelations, I learned that one of my children was struggling with opioid addiction. And you can imagine the guilt and the anguish that I felt as a parent, because here I was, the person who was fighting against the pharmaceutical companies who were dumping medications into our communities. I was the lone voice standing up and saying, this is wrong. And yet, I really didn't get anywhere with that. But the weight of all this was really horrible. And then with the revelations from my child, along with the whistleblowing, it just felt like I was drowning in grief. And I also decided, so this is an important point, because Jackie brought it up when she gave me the Giraffe Award. I am a very persistent person. And I think the combination of my own personal grief at my child who was suffering and what corporate America and the pharmaceutical company was doing to American families, including my own, I was not going to stand for it. And I did do everything in my own power to try to right the situation. Because as Ashley alluded to, what results are you looking for? My result was I wanted the pharmaceutical companies to stop doing this, because not only were other families suffering, but my family was suffering, my child was suffering, while pharmaceutical companies were padding their bottom line. So to add more grief to the situation, and we'll move past this soon, I promise, but in the midst of my child's recovery, there were some other things that happened. I lost both of my companion dogs within months of each other. Now, as you've probably figured out, I'm a dog person. So having the grief of whistleblowing, my child, and then I lost these two dogs, it was just anguish for me. But then the worst happened. This is hard. I can do it. One of my 5 children suddenly passed away following an unknown illness. There was just nothing left in me. But I knew there had to be. So I felt like I was in quicksand, actually, and that I was just sinking further every day, and I didn't see any way out. And I often wondered if my family would be better off without me. As a spiritual person, thank goodness, I prayed for direction in my life, and direction I received. Drawing on my respect and admiration for veterans and my love for dogs, I began volunteering at an organization that trained dogs for veterans with PTSD and other combat-related challenges. And it was there that my own transformation began, witnessing their transformation. But what's interesting to note is that every veteran who came by way of a PTSD dog, which was through organizations, only came to the organization as a last result. The dog healed the veterans in ways that no other therapy or person could. Their dog offered safety, grounding, and hope in a way that they had never received before. The veterans often describe their dogs as miraculous and life-saving. Surprisingly, although service dogs are trained for, on average, 35 to 40 specific cues for each veteran, the veterans will overwhelmingly cite the dog's unconditional presence as the most valuable aspect of their relationship. Now, dogs had always been a part of my life, my entire life. It's my first memory in the whole world is of me and my dog. But I had never witnessed such profound transformation, ever. And I decided, being a curious person, I need to understand why this is happening and how does it happen, because I want to be a part of it. So in 2019, I enrolled at Bergen University of Canine Studies and earned a Master of Science degree in Human Canine Life Sciences. What I didn't anticipate was that I unexpectedly found myself right in the middle of the canine cognition revolution. So we're going to take a step forward before we take a step way back. And I am currently on the faculty at Bergen University of Canine Studies, and I teach the graduates and the undergraduates what I'm about to share with you. Luckily, you're going to get the Cliff Notes version. But the human-canine bond is one of the most enduring in all of evolutionary history. These beautiful creatures have been by our side for at least 14,000 years, and probably longer. The most remarkable feature of our bond is that dogs have evolved alongside us and formed an astonishing sensitivity to human communication. They excel at human observation. A dog's unique ability to interpret human gestures, emotions, and intentions reveals that they have been always wired to collaborate with us. This level of social intelligence explains why training, teamwork, and companionship with dogs feels so natural, because it is natural. Their capacity to read us is at the very heart of our bond. A dog's cognitive skills make them excellent partners, and their biology reinforces this emotionally rich bond. Neurochemical circuits strengthen our bonding pathways of trust and attachment. The oxytocin positive feedback loop, critical to social bonding between dogs and humans, is the exact same hormonal exchange that occurs between human mothers and infants. Canine domestication cleverly tapped into this ancient attachment system that was already present in humans, reinforcing the bond between us. The shared hormonal response to each other's presence lowers blood pressure, slows and synchronizes heart rates, and calms the nervous system, all signs of physiological relaxation. The biochemical bonding effect and being alongside humans has shaped dogs into masters of synchrony. They can match our walking pace, they match our sleeping schedule, and they mirror human emotional states. This co-regulation reflects and deepens our dog's attunement to us. Armed with this remarkable research, I set out to put it to good use in training service dogs for people with disabilities. But by the grace of God and the generosity of a friend, I was gifted a magnificent golden retriever for my 59th birthday. There was now no doubt in my mind that I was called to be restored and to restore others through the power of the human-canine bond. Tully would be my guide towards healing, resilience, and trust. Dogs offer an alternative form of therapy, and this is an important consideration listening to some of the talks that I heard today where the lawyers were saying, well, what should we do? Maybe we need to reconsider this. Dogs offer an alternative form of therapy. Reliable, positive relationships, even across species, restore neural pathways that have been shaped by trauma. The trust cultivated with the dog is a bridge towards re-engaging with humans. Tully became that bridge for me. Following physical threats to my safety, hypervigilance became my reality. It was mentally and physically exhausting to constantly be on high alert. Tully's calming presence helped me through this period, as you can see. Her heightened senses alerted me to anything that was unusual or strangers approaching. In essence, she became my early warning system so that I could become less vigilant. For whistleblowers whose sense of security has been rattled or damaged, dogs can restore this sense of physical well-being. All successful relationships depend on communication, and so too does our relationship. They're constantly in communication with us, primarily through their body language. Referential signaling, which is a dog's direct line of communication to us, requires that we tune out of our digital world and tune into their needs and the natural world. Spending time in nature, of course, is therapy and has proven cognitive, emotional, and existential benefits. Learning the basics of canine communication is a prerequisite for a deep and meaningful relationship. A dog's communication is pure and straightforward, a refreshing change from humans. They don't deceive, they don't gaslight, and they don't have hidden agendas. Dogs ask no questions. They don't need to because they already know the answers. Through their superpower of scent detections, dogs smell our joy, sadness, our anger, and our fear. They experience the same basic emotions that we feel, and also some of our more complex ones, such as empathy, jealousy, and grief. Sharing emotions is the glue of social bonding. I recently read a quote by Parker Palmer, and it struck me as the essence of our bond. The human soul doesn't want to be advised, fixed, or saved. It simply wants to be witnessed, to be seen, heard, and companioned exactly as it is. And that is precisely what dogs do for us. They provide a stable and secure presence. They're content to quietly sit with us and hold our pain in confidence until we are ready to move on. They become steady partners in restoring and maintaining mental health. But resilience is not only about enduring hardship. It's about transforming and emerging wiser and stronger and renewed. What began as a way to escape the trauma of whistleblowing, training service dogs for veterans, was inherently healing for me. It counterbalanced the narrative of defeat that was caused by retaliation. That act of volunteerism turned into a journey of self-preservation and has changed the trajectory of my life. My deeply personal struggle has been reshaped into a public gift that I share with you today. We have fostered the most extraordinary biological and emotional relationship in all of nature. In light of the coevolution of brain structures, neurochemical pathways, emotions, and sensitivity to social cues, it is no wonder that dogs are a bridge from trauma to restoration. We have a partner in rewiring stress, restoring trust, rebuilding resilience, and guiding us on the long walk back to wholeness. As I wrap up my comments, I'd like to ask you to think about one question. Why are dogs considered last resort healing? They've certainly proven themselves over time, through science, and across disabilities. Their healing power extends to all ages and those with physical and emotional needs. Now is the time to move dogs up in the hierarchy of therapeutic options. For those of us who have risked everything and lost much, dogs provide an unparalleled lifeline. Their presence is literally a leash of courage. From the bottom of our synchronized hearts, Tully and I thank you for inviting us into your family.
Thank you. Are there any questions before I begin to sort of wrap us up for today? Pamela.
How is your message being received?
It's being received very well because it's not often you run into someone that is, very much against dogs. They're very friendly, and I'm sensitive to watching people's body language, and if they have any indication that they don't want her near them, then I pull her away. So I'm really sensitive to that. But people are generally very interested in the message, and some are astounded, I would say, by the message. And I have to humbly admit I was too, because I'd had dogs all my life. I just wanted to know why we were so connected to them. I had no idea that the answer to my story would be rooted in 15,000 years of evolutionary history. And even the fact, I teach people all over the world actually about canine body language. And when I reveal some of it, that is really, it's very clear and very transparent once you know what you're looking for, but people are a little incredulous. Well, I've had dogs all my life. And I'm like, that's the point. That's the point. They're so ubiquitous. They've been beside us for so long, and we still don't understand them very well, but they understand us. And I think that once you kind of frame it in that way, then people are like, oh, I get it now. Okay, I can see how this could work. And then once you start helping people to connect with their dogs, which is what I do through my company called Leash of Courage, I try to establish those very foundational things that will help not just veterans and not just whistleblowers, but basically anyone who is interested in having a deep, very deep and meaningful relationship with their dog. I can't help you with your cat, but I can help you with your dog. Does that answer your question? Mm-hmm.
What's the success rate? I understand there's a low success rate as far as
So yes, I have worked for several different service dog organizations, and now I teach at a service dog college. The success rate is actually less than 50% in dogs that go on to be service dogs. And that's kind of amazing, and it's kind of sad because many of these dogs, most of the organizations, they call purpose breed their dogs. So they take service dogs that have been successful, and then they breed other dogs thinking that the genetics will carry down, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. A 50% success rate is not very high. And, basically it's a crapshoot for these organizations. And they have put thousands and thousands of dollars. I think that the estimate now is around $30,000 per year to train a service dog. And you may think, gosh, why is that so high? Well, you have to remember, these dogs are not only purpose bred, so they're coming from a breeder. That cost a lot of money. They're also trained literally from the time they are 3 weeks old, 24 hours a day. Now, that doesn't mean the dogs are trained to sit and lie down 24 hours a day. It means that they are always with other humans, in human contact and in human experiences, 24 hours a day for up to 2 years, 2.5 years. That's a lot of training for these dogs. So that's one of the reasons that it's so expensive to get a service dog. If you pay for a service dog, most people do not. They go through organizations where they receive the dog free of charge, but they'll be on a waiting list for up to 5 years. So by that time, you may not even need or want a service dog. And so that's the problem in the service dog industry, is you have a lot of need, but the way that the dogs are trained takes so long that by the time the person actually gets the dog, do they still have the same needs that they did 5 years ago? And usually as I cited the research that was done with veterans, where these dogs are trained for 35, 40, 45, 50 different tasks, their specific tasks that they're trained for, overwhelmingly, the veterans will say that the most valuable thing to them is that the dog's presence, constant presence by their side. Now that's something that I can train a dog. There are certain aspects to it that you train dogs for, but that should be available to everyone. I mean,
Trying to start a program at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. I started a program at Walter Reed Army Medical Center because there were a lot of veterans who were just laid up in bed and not doing anything. So we thought it would be good if we could basically take care of the palms, the dogs that need a home, and
yes.
take them to the hospital so that they have something to do rather than just sit down and watch TV.
Yeah.
And the doctors and the medical staff were really, really opposed to it because they said there's so many dogs that aren't bred. And VA right now, last time I checked, was paying $10,000 for a service dog when we see the dogs being euthanized because there were too many in the animal shelters. And we were kind of scratching our head trying to figure out why.
I somewhat agree with what they say, but I more agree with what you say. And here's the reason. If Tully had come from a shelter, she may be slightly different in her behavior, but if you had a trained person like me, I am now actually a certified professional dog trainer in addition to all the other things, because not only did I want to learn the why, I wanted to learn the how. How do I go about this? So if you have a person that is not fully trained in how to recognize certain behaviors that would be helpful to the veterans and behaviors that would be a detriment, you know, like prey drive and things, just something as simple as a prey drive. Can the person who is starting your organization, can they recognize prey drives? And if you can't, do you know how to find the person who could? The dog training industry is unregulated. So every person in this room literally could go out tomorrow and say, hey, I'm a dog trainer. Even though you may not have the knowledge or the background, you still could do that. And that is part of the problem with dog training in general, and especially service dogs who are at a much higher level of training, but also expectation. Like if she were in here barking, you all would think, what is wrong with that dog? That is not a service dog. And you would be right. She's a dog.
We have 3 more questions.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Anyway, so there are just aspects to it that that you'd have to have a really trained person to help you. It's not that shelter dogs can't do it. It's just that you have to have a really trained person experienced in that field to be able to say this dog will work, that dog won't. And it takes a lot of experience.
Okay, you kind of touched on what I was going to ask.
Okay.
Because with the trauma that I dealt with in whistleblowing, that's one of the things that I did too. I went and I took my energy and my emotions and went and started fostering dogs. I've fostered over 100 dogs, and I've currently still work with our local animal shelter, and we have a surgical unit also. And that's one of the things we also at our shelter have a behavioral specialist who judges how those dogs can interact with other dogs and which dogs can go into which play groups, which dogs react and which dogs don't. And that's one of the things that I wonder is what he was asking, why more shelter dogs, why could they not? I mean, I had a shelter dog for 13 years, and I can tell you she was not a professionally trained,
Right.
A dog that had any type of training, but I can tell you she was the best therapeutic dog that I've ever seen in my entire life, and I still have never seen one like it. Is this something that could be looked into, that would someone like you go into a shelter? Because we have puppies there too. We have golden retriever puppies. Right. Instead of paying thousands of dollars with breeders, these dogs are being what they're not euthanized in our shelter, but at other shelters they are.
Right.
And I just think that would just.
Oh, I feel your sorrow, because I volunteered in a shelter for a decade. And our shelter was a non-euthanasia shelter also. But it is really, really sad to see. And going into a service dog training college and working with organizations that purposely breed dogs for this, I've always had a real problem with that. And the explanation has always been, it costs so much to raise a service dog, we really can't take a chance. Well, if you're at 50-50 anyway, I mean, are you really taking that much of a chance if you have a trained professional who goes in and can evaluate a shelter dog? Yes, it's being done. It's being done all over. You just have to find the right setup. For whistleblowers per se, here's the dilemma. And it was a dilemma that I faced, which is why I trained my own service dog. I couldn't tell anybody I was a whistleblower. I had no health insurance. I couldn't go to the doctor and say, hey, I'm feeling all this great grief and depression. And he would say, why? And I'd say, well, I'm sorry, I can't tell you. Okay, that's not going to go over. So what I did was I decided I was going to learn the why and the how, and I was going to train my own service dog for me. And that's how I came to this conclusion and this new life, basically. I rewrote my life because I had to. There was no way I would want to go back into the pharmaceutical industry, or they would accept me back into it. I didn't want to be a part of that world anymore. And this world is so much more fulfilling. And they're exactly, that's why they're therapy, right? They're great. They're great. They're very healing. They're very therapeutic. And it's just really difficult to make a living doing dog things. Whether you're a trainer, if you're a service dog trainer like I am, you have to either work with an organization or you have to form your own nonprofit, because now people expect service dogs for free because they can get them for free if they go through the right series of steps and know which organization to go to. There are thousands of organizations across the United States that will give you a service dog for free if you want to wait for 4 or 5 years. In my case, I didn't want to wait 4 or 5 years. I needed it now. And did I necessarily need a service dog? Maybe. But I was going to train that dog to do all the cool things that I had seen dogs do, even if I didn't need it at that point. I mean, she doesn't look that amazing, but she is. She can grab me. She comes to wake me up in the morning. I don't have to set an alarm. She can go to the refrigerator, open it, and get a bottle of water and bring it back to me, and then go back and close the fridge. She comes and goes out of the house.
Can you train my husband?
No, I cannot train a husband. I can train a dog, but not a husband. I mean, they're just amazing things that they can do. Yes. Yes, sorry.
Well, it's not a question, it's a comment. Ashley and Noelle, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your incredible testimony today. I've been totally humbled. And one thing that you said, Noelle, is I've been wondering why my husband took a second wife, which is a dog. And now you're making me feel a lot better about it. Thank you to you both.
You're welcome.